Hello and welcome to this part 2 summary of Mentats of Dune. Now, as I mentioned in my community notes, I haven't seen the show yet, but at the end of this book, Valya Harkonnen is just starting her ascent into power, into being this very powerful Reverend Mother. And so I believe that the events of the book are actually more based on Navigators of Dune, which is the next book. I'm so desperate to see the show at this point, but because I'm really enjoying the books and I don't want any spoilers, I'm just going to hold off. Even seeing the trailer might have revealed to me a little bit more than I would have liked to know. But yeah, anyway, just to kind of catch you up on where we were, the entire universe is pretty much caught in the middle of this battle between Venport Holdings, the pro-technology side and all of their allies, and Manford Torondo and his Butlerians. There are some people who are, kind of neutral, like the Emperor, mostly out of cowardice. But through his neutrality, he's ceding a lot of ground to the Butlerian movement, who are a very, very destructive movement. So the tensions between these two groups are reaching a boiling point, pretty much, and it feels as though we're getting closer and closer to all-out war. Anyway, onto the video. Rakella is getting to the point in her old age where not even melange and other remedies are going to extend her life for much longer. She's quickly declining, even though she's able to manipulate her cells to sustain her life for a few more days. The timing of her ill health and death being imminent is really terrible though, because the sisterhood has been fractured for a while now, and Rakella still needs to decide on who's going to be her successor. She could hear voices of other memory, of the other sisters who want her to join them, but she doesn't feel ready. She tells one of the Mentat sisters, Fiella, that she's dying, and Fiella suggests that Rakella puts pressure on the two factions of the sisterhood to mend fences, that there is no time anymore. She shouldn't underestimate the power of being a martyr and how motivating that can be. Rakella agrees to end her life if she must, to raise the stakes, since her life is at its end anyway. Her death can accomplish one final thing. Meanwhile, Vorian Atreides is learning about life on Caladan again. Though Caladan was quiet and bucolic, it boasted an impressive air patrol agency. The scattered fishing fleets, the occasional sea storms, and the creatures out in the deep oceans all required the locals to be ready to mount a rapid and efficient rescue when necessary. Vorian had actually set up and funded the Caladan Air Patrol many years ago. His great-great-grandsons, Willem and Ori, were young, but they were very important pilots in training. Vor eventually gets to meet them. The boys showed no animosity towards him, just friendly curiosity. It appeared that any disappointment Estes and Kargan might have felt towards Vor had not lasted over the generations, unlike the business House Harkonnen felt towards him. He could start fresh with these young men, earn their friendship without any preconceptions. Ori tells Vor that he should come to his wedding, and the brothers also invite Vor to fly with them when he expresses interest in volunteering as a pilot. As they're going out, an emergency comes in, and Vor joins them out on this rescue mission. The victim, who's pulled out of the water, is dead by the time they rescue him. It also ends up being none other than Shunda Atreides, the boy's uncle. Upon closer inspection, it seems as though Shunda had been beaten, and his death wasn't an accident. On Gina's, Master Placido took a liking to Valya during her training, giving her extra attention. He was also obviously attracted to her, but she had other things on her mind. They end up sparring with each other, and of course, at first he wins because he is the better fighter, but Valya starts learning his emotions to anticipate his moves, and then she also uses some moves that she'd learned from Griffin. Also, she is a Reverend Mother, so she has that particular skill set as well. As he charged towards her, Valya stood her ground and said in a compelling, throaty articulation that summoned a core of command, "Halt!" Master Placido froze as if she'd felled him with a club. The tip of his extended blade stopped a hand's breadth from her chest. She drew tremendous satisfaction from seeing the gleam in his eyes replaced by shock. He stood there, paralyzed. Smiling, Valya said with all the force that she could in her voice, "Do not move." She walked around him, as if he'd become a statue. Instead of killing Placido, though, she used the edge of her sword to draw a thin red line across his brow. Not a deep wound, but enough to leave a fine white scar to remind him of his defeat. So all of the students had come to watch the fight and regarded her with awe. Then she received an urgent message from Wallach X from Rakella telling Valya to come soon because she wants to announce her successor. Manford's deputies decide to increase his security after the failed assassination attempt. He is certain that Joseph Venport was behind the attempt, and he's determined to get his revenge by somehow hurting what matters most to Venport: his profits. When I get to Seleucia, I will demand that Emperor Salvador cease all spice operations on Arrakis. We showed our power during the Rampage Festival, and he will do whatever we ask. If the Imperium absorbs spice operations, there will be an advantage to the Emperor as well, Sister Woodrow pointed out. Given the huge profits in the melange industry, that planet should be under Imperial control. Manford insists on traveling to Seleucia because he's not a coward. He wants to file a complaint with the Emperor against Venport. Before that, though, he wants to thank his new body double who was about to go through a metamorphosis surgery. His people had to go through a lot of trouble scouring planets to find suitable lookalikes. Still, they would need to amputate his legs, the body double's legs, because remember, Manford Torondo has no legs. Then a spy is found among Manford's staff, an old woman named Elonda, who had been with Manford for years, but after the assassination attempt, she was caught sending a message back to Venport. They decide then that more extreme action is needed to keep the population in line. The crisis is upon us, and there can be no further doubts about loyalty to our cause. I have to know who is with me, who is against me. Everyone must choose a side publicly. No one can be neutral. Our entire population will reaffirm their loyalty to me or face death. We should require individual oaths, Leader Torondo, Harian suggested. Not just communities and planets promising general allegiance. Each person must swear before a trusted official that they believe that technology is evil. His voice gained vehemence. Any advanced machinery, electronics, or other insidious devices must be discarded on pain of death. Everyone needs to pay allegiance to Manford. Undeniably, Ptolemy was excited to usher in a time of the new Titans. His Titans. He continued to work on the Cymex to improve them. More Tuluxa specialists were brought in to do more work and research, but yeah, obviously this was forbidden by the Butlerians. In the imperial household, while artists were entertaining the royal family, Dorothea spots Sister Arlette, her mother, and mother and daughter find a quiet place to talk, and Arlette tells Dorothea that she has an important message from Wallach X. Before she can say anything, Dorothea tells Arlette that she is Arlette's daughter, that the sisterhood, Rakalla, separated mother and daughter before they could bond. They don't end up bonding, but Arlette does tell Dorothea that she should come to Wallach X soon because Rakalla is not long for the world and she wants to announce her successor. Meanwhile, still in the imperial household on Seleucia, Manford and the Butlerians arrive and have some demands for the emperor. Not long ago, you disbanded the poisonous sisterhood school on Rossack because they conspired against you. Now, you must do the same to Venport Holdings. Joseph Venport is creating monsters to navigate his ships, corrupting the human form and the human mind. His ships use computers too. We have proof, because we captured a fold-space vessel he sent to Barrage. I demand that you condemn Venport for this act, just as you must condemn him for the continued use of thinking machines. His crimes are inexcusable. The penalty must be death. After some back and forth, Emperor Salvador decides that he wants to take control of the spice. I hereby declare that spice operations are strategically vital to the Imperium, and by law, must be operated under direct Imperial control. As Emperor, I shall take charge of Arrakis and mobilize the Imperial fleet to enforce my will. My trade advisors will inform Director Venport and prepare the necessary documentation for a smooth transition. The Emperor's brother Roderick thinks that this is a rash decision and he doesn't agree with this. I mean, he knew that this was a bad move because Venport would retaliate. And yeah, when news does get to Venport on Kolhar, he is livid. Venhold's demand for spice production had increased month after month as the Navigator conversion program expanded. Even after the mutated humans finished their transformation, they required extensive amounts of melange to maintain proper saturation levels. Yosef refused to tolerate any disruption in the flow of melange, neither by the barbarians nor by the emperor. On Lamparas at the Mentats school, the Butlerian delegation arrives and they tell Gilbertus to gather his students to say the pledge, the oath. Obviously, Gilbertus is having none of it. I am the headmaster here and I choose what is best for my students. Leader Torondo may discuss the matter with me in person when he returns from Seleucia Secundus, but this school will retain its authority and honor. Now, please leave. Emperor Salvador decides to head to Arrakis to meet with Venport, while Roderick stays behind on Seleucia. Remember, Roderick, even though he does feel that Venport is the lesser of two evils, he knows that Joseph Venport still has a lot of power and influence, and this is concerning. Roderick knew that both Venport Holdings and the Butlerian movement needed to be drastically weakened before the Carino throne could regain its rightful level of power. And with that goal in mind, perhaps Salvador's action was a step in the right direction to diminish Director Venport's power. After that, the Butlerians had to be neutered. Better, Roderick thought, if the two forces could bloody each other, Salvador says that he's tired of this war between Venport and the Butlerians and that he wants to show them who's boss, basically. Back on Caladan, there are some questions around Shanda's death. The coroner had ruled that he had been struck in the head and swept out to sea, but nobody could prove that this was murder. Vor feels for Willem and Ori Atreides after the loss of their uncle. Vor eventually meets Ori's betrothed, and he thinks that he's seen her face before. It looks familiar, even though he knows that he's never met her before. Ori introduces his wife-to-be as Tula Vale. You know, like, I'm guessing because she's from Lanky Vale, and not Tula Harkonnen. On Lampalas, Gilbertus addresses the students, telling them that if they wish to sign Manford's oath, they can, but they need to think logically about it, what it would mean for them. He tells them that those students who wish to leave can leave, and a group of dedicated Butlerian students do leave, much to Gilbertus's relief, because he never really wanted them there in the first place. Gilbertus believes that he should have stood up to Manford sooner, but he's doing it now, even though he knows that the Butlerians are very dangerous. The students who left also took with them a lot of knowledge about the school, like its layout and its defenses. He and his remaining students did spend a lot of their time studying the Butlerians and Manford's oath, making all sorts of predictions. They discussed all sorts of outcomes so that they'd be able to anticipate what the Butlerians could do and not be caught by complete surprise. Later, Gilbertus goes to the hangar to check on his escape shuttle should things get really bad, and he notices that somebody had smashed and dismantled it, and Gilbertus had no spare parts. There was no escape. So yeah, the students did do some sabotage before leaving. Of course, when Manford gets the news that Gilbertus is not just going to be a loyal foot soldier like that, he's disappointed, but he is conflicted anyway by the idea of the Mentats, because they are human computers. He didn't like that they emulated computers. Manford made up his mind. We will bring a Butlerian army to the Mentat school and resolve this. But our main battle is not here on Lambalas against a group of scholars who seek to make computers irrelevant. I want all of our supporters in harmony so that we can fight the true threat of Director Venport. I'd much rather secure the headmaster's cooperation. Maybe I can still convince him to swear the oath. Gilbertus is still useful to him after all. Gilbertus is aware that the army is coming because he made so many projections, so when they do come, he's not really that surprised. Manford and his army arrive at the school and they set up by the gates, but obviously Gilbertus doesn't let them through and they end up in an impasse. Surprisingly, Manford stands down for now, but he and the Butlerians set up camp outside the perimeter of the school. It's really dangerous though. There's predatory creatures in a swamp and they kill some people, and they also seriously injure Inari, Idaho when they're attacked. Meanwhile, on Wallach X, all of the sisters, including Dorothea and Valya, who had since returned from training with the Swordmasters, have convened in order to hear what the Reverend Mother has to say about her successor. Rakella is determined to heal the rift between the two factions, but Valya is very reluctant, and she makes this known. She thinks that the sisters on the Butlerian side are traitors. When Rakella addresses the Seleucid sisters and their Wallach X counterparts, it's clear that they'll never get along, and she leaves the room then and writes a letter explaining that she's not going to appoint a successor. She sent these identical letters to Valya, Dorothea, and a couple of others, and she goes to stand on the edge of a cliff. She hopes that this dramatic death would force Valya and Dorothea to work together. The next morning, they find Rakella standing on the edge of the cliff, and Valya calls out to her and tells her that they will work on their differences. Valya pushed her way forward. We read your message, and it brought us to our senses. Dorothea and I have come here together, and we promise to do whatever is necessary to heal the wounds. Then Valya's voice shifted, and she said in a throaty, emphatic tone, You will not jump, Mother Superior. Step back from the edge, now. Rakella ends up doing just that, and afterwards they give her their word that they'll work together, and she comes obviously off of the cliff's edge. Varian Atreides feels like Caladan is his home again, as his preparations are underway for Ori and Tula's wedding. There's still something in Tula's eye that expressed a hostility towards him though. Vor saw it and he couldn't understand it. It was as though she had something against Vor. A spark of a memory came back to him and he tensed. The youngest daughter of Virgil Harkonnen, Griffin's other younger sister. What's her name? Tula? Ori's new wife did have a hint of Griffin's features, but Vor wasn't convinced. He'd never met either of Virgil Harkonnen's daughters. Although he had seen a family portrait inside the Harkonnen household, he couldn't quite remember what the girls looked like. It must just be a coincidence. Similar names. That evening, Tula goes to attack Vorian as he sleeps, but he manages to fight her off. That's when she reveals herself. She is Tula Harkonnen and she wants to avenge the death of her brother Griffin, who she mistakenly believes was killed by Vor. Willem hears this noise and he runs over, and Vought tells him that they need to find Ori. They do find him in his bed, throat cut open, and his bed is soaked in blood. Tula had also left a note for them. The last words Shanda and Ori Atreides heard: Tula Vale is Tula Harkonnen of Lanky Vale. The price of Atreides' treachery is Harkonnen vengeance. We have only begun to hunt you down. First Shanda, then Ori, then all the rest of the vermin. Never enough to compensate for the murder of our beloved brother, son, friend, and companion, Griffin Harkonnen. We loved you dearly. Take flight, Atreides cowards, and try to hide, but you must flee for all time because we will never forget. On Wallach X, Raquella, who's now on her deathbed, summons all of the sisters to hear a Mentat projection that one of the other sisters had. She announces that there will likely be a civil war in the sisterhood and that either Valya or Dorothea are going to start it. That's why she suggested that Raquella offer to martyr herself. That would bring the factions together. When they gently press her for a successor, she, Raquella, says that she wants both Valya and Dorothea to lead the sisterhood together. Dorothea accepts this, but Valya looks disturbed by the prospect. After Raquella dies, Dorothea tells Valya that it's up to them now, but Valya is having none of it, obviously. She says, no, actually, it's up to me. She uses the voice and her specialized GNAS training to demand that Dorothea take a blade from her, and then she tells Dorothea to drive it into her throat. Dorothea tries hard to fight it, but she's unable to, and she eventually does what she's told. Now, Valya Harkonnen is the new Mother Superior. On Lampalas, Gilbertus and Manford finally have their talk. The rest of the Butlerians are itching for a fight, and they think that the headmaster has already betrayed the movement, but Manford orders them to stand down for now. One of the Butlerians, the Deacon Harian, then steps forward with evidence that Gilbertus is the same Gilbertus who was a ward of Erasmus back on Corin. After some really calm denials, Gilbertus eventually admits that, indeed, he is the same one, and he's been alive for more than 180 years. Back on Arrakis, Taref, on orders by Venport, is to go onto the Imperial barge of the Emperor who's going to be visiting, remember? And he has to sabotage it so that the Emperor doesn't make it back home safely. In exchange, Taref will be let free. He will have no more obligations towards Venport. He does make it onto the Imperial barge, but at the last minute he has a change of heart. Feeling a knot in his stomach, the young man reconsidered. He studied the engine control board, not wanting his conscience haunted by the Emperor's ghost in addition to another one. Venport has a plan B though. He sneaks a device onto the Emperor's barge and he detonates it anyway. Gilbertus, meanwhile, is sentenced to execution, and the Mentat school will go through a re-education program. Erasmus and Anna Corino, who are hiding in the school, know that they are in danger, and Erasmus tells Anna that they're going to need to escape. Drago reaches Lampalas to again convince Gilbertus to switch sides, only to find the chaos caused by the Butlerians. He lands at a safe distance and he snoops around the encampment, seeing a captured Gilbertus. He eventually infiltrates the encampment, pretending to be a Butlerian sympathizer. He incapacitates the guards and he gets to Gilbertus and tells him that he's there to save him, but Gilbertus refuses to leave his post, saying that Manford and the Butlerians will burn the school to the ground, but there is somebody that Drago could save: Erasmus and Anna Corino. Just then, the Butlerians realize that there's someone there, and Drago has to make a reluctant escape in order to carry out Gilbertus's wishes. On Arrakis, Salvador, who is somewhere else at this time watching the spice operations, gets news that there has been an explosion on the Imperial shuttle and it's suspected sabotage. The engines have been ruined and now they're all trapped on Arrakis. Venport comes on the comms then to tell Salvador that he's decided to reject the Imperial seizure of his spice operation. But not all is lost for the Emperor's side. The guard captain, still waving his ineffective pistol, took over the spice factory's comm systems, swiftly adjusting to a private frequency to transmit to the Imperial barge in orbit. Our Emperor is under attack. Convey this urgent message to Seleucus Secundus. Director Joseph Venport sabotaged the operations and abandoned us to be consumed by a sandworm. I do not believe we can survive. I have failed in my sworn duty. As the Imperial barge is trying to make its escape, Venport warships, which have just arrived on the scene, start firing at it. The Imperial ship, though, then activates its emergency Holtzman engines, remember those, and they escape. Joseph hopes that Taref had done enough damage on the inside so that they won't get far. Little does he know, Taref didn't. On Wallach X, Valya is now Mother Superior, and while Sister Dorothea's companion sisters are suspicious, they are truthsayers, remember, and they can't detect any falsehoods in what Valya is saying. That Dorothea took the knife to her own neck out of guilt and grief. She also suggests that Raquella and Dorothea be cremated together. The Seleucid sisters obviously know nothing about the computer breeding records, and Valya wants to keep it that way and only let in the inner circle. Through the swamps and the bushes of Lampalas. At one point, they come across a Butlerian who tries to take Anna, but other memory sort of activates in her, and she's able to fight him off, and Erasmus executes him. She also runs into Drygo, who has been looking for her, and he offers them safe passage to Kolhar. The next morning, Gilbertus is executed. Valya Harkonnen had been Vor's sworn enemy before Serena Butler's jihad, then became his closest friend after Vor had switched sides. Decades later, Xavier's grandson Abelard had been like a son to Vorian, his military protege until the young man's cowardly disgrace. Even though back then, Vor actually saved Abelard from execution and he just banished him to Lankivel instead, the Harkonnens didn't see this as a favor. Generations later, Griffin Harkonnen hunted down Vor and intended to kill him. Now his sister Tula expanded the bloodshed, murdering Atreides' descendants who had never even met Vor until recently. Vor sends a message to any Atreides descendants on Caladan, warning them, and then he heads to Kepler. Remember, he also had a family on Kepler. Anyway, Willem accompanies him. It's weeks later, and Roderick is worried because his brother, Emperor Salvador, is not back yet. And so Roderick does launch a few investigations. Yosef Venport goes to see the new Emperor Roderick because he wants to make an alliance and rebuild. After all, Roderick was the more reasonable brother who wouldn't let the Butlerians run amok, right? Just as they're discussing the future of the realm, a courier comes in saying that the Imperial barge has been found. Roderick then accuses Venport of assassinating his brother, but before anything can happen, Norma Kenva folds space around them and they both disappear into thin air, basically. Drygo, Erasmus, and Anna finally make it safely to Denali, where all of the scientists are working on the new Cymax. And that is the end of Mentats of Dune. We have Valya Harkonnen, who's risen the ranks and she's become Mother Superior on Wallach X. Erasmus and Anna Carino have escaped from Lampalas, and they're now in Denali, where all of the illegal robot building is happening. Gilbertus obviously was beheaded for not wanting to bend the knee to Manford Torondo, and the Harkonnens are out for blood. Atreides blood, to be specific. Anyway, yeah, if you have read the book, feel free to share your thoughts, and thank you for watching.